careful.
I think that that knowledge has a tendency to become mechanical, that is, to get fixed. Right?
Yeah.
But we could be always learning, you see.
But learning from a center, learning from as an accumulative process.
Well, that learning, I think, with something fixed. You see, you accept something as fixed and you learn from there. But if we were to be learning without holding anything permanently fixed.
That is, learning and not adding. Can you do that?
Yes, well, you see, I think that to a certain extent we have to lose, we have to drop our knowledge. You see, knowledge may be valid up to a point, and then it ceases to be valid. It gets in the way. You could say that our civilization is sort of collapsing from too much knowledge.
That's what I was, of course.
That we don't drop what's in the way.
Many forms of knowledge are additive. I mean, unless you know the previous thing, you can't do the next thing. Would you say that kind of knowledge is repetitive?
No, as long as you're learning, you see. But if you hold some principle fixed and say it cannot change, see, if you hold the center fixed, yourself, or anything fixed, then that knowledge becomes mechanical. But see, if you say you have got to keep on learning.
Learning what?
Whatever you're doing. You see, for example, suppose you have to make a living. You see, people must organize the society and do all kinds of things. They need knowledge, right?
That's knowledge. But there you add more and more.
That's right, but you may also get rid of some.
Some, of course.
You don't keep on. Some gets in the way, you see. So it's continually moving, right?
Yes, but I'm asking, apart from that, knowledge itself.
Well, yes, but I mean, what you mean knowledge without this content, right?
The knowing mind.
Well, a mind which merely wants knowledge, is that what you're saying?
Yes, yes.
Just for its own sake?
Yes.
Hmm?
Mm. No, I want to question, if I may, the whole idea of having knowledge.
Yes, but again, it's not too clear, you see, because, you see, you accept that we need knowledge.
Of course, at a certain
level. So it's not clear what kind of knowledge it is that you're questioning, you see.
I'm questioning the experience that leaves knowledge.
That
leaves
knowledge. Yes, but again, when you say the experience of driving a car, but I mean, it's not. We want to make it clear that what kind of it leaves a mark psychologically, is that
psychologically, of course. I'm talking
psychological knowledge of technique and matter and so on.
Of course.
Yeah, but you see, when you use the word knowledge by itself, it tends to include the whole.
No, we have said knowledge at a certain level is essential. There we can add and take away and keep on changing, moving there. But I'm questioning whether psychological knowledge is not in itself a factor of the shrinking of the brain.
Yes, well, that's what do you mean by psychological knowledge? Knowledge about the mind, knowledge about myself?
Yes.
Knowledge about what?
Knowledge about myself and living in that knowledge and accumulating that knowledge.
Yes. So if you keep on accumulating knowledge about yourself, or about relationships.
Yes, about relationships. So that's it, sir. Would you say such knowledge helps the brain, makes the brain somewhat inactive, somewhat makes the brain shrink.
Puts it into a rut. I mean, but you see, one should see why. What is it about this knowledge that makes so much trouble?
What is this knowledge that makes so much trouble? In relationship, that knowledge does create trouble.
Yes, it gets in the way.
In the way.
Because it fixes the...
Yes.
And also
if I have an image about him and I'm related to him, that knowledge is obviously going to impede our it becomes a pattern.
Yes, well, the knowledge about myself and about him, and how we are related.
Yes.
makes a pattern.
Yes. And therefore that becomes routine, and so it loses its...
Yes, and it occurred to me to see that routine in that area is more dangerous than routine in, say, the area of work.
That,
I mean, if,
that's right.
if routine
That's right.
in ordinary work can shrink the brain, then in that area it might
That's
do
right.
some worse, something worse, because it has
So-
a bigger effect. Right?
So can the brain, in the psychological matters, be entirely free from knowledge, from this kind of knowledge? That is, look, I'm a businessman, and I get into the car or bus or a taxi or the tube, and I'm thinking what I'm going to do, whom I'm going to meet, or business talk, and my mind is all the time living in that area. I come home, there's a wife and children, sex and all that. That also becomes a psychological knowledge from which I'm acting. So there is the business, the knowledge of my business and contacts and all that, and also there is the knowledge with regard to my wife and myself, my reactions. So these two are in contradiction. Or I am unaware of these two and just carry on. If I am aware of these two, it becomes a disturbing factor.
Yeah. Well, also people find that it is a routine and they get bored with it and they begin to
Divorce
want to
and
change
all
it.
the
So,
whole
yes,
circus begins.
And they may hope that by becoming occupied with something else, they
Yes.
can get out of the...
Go to church and go to etc. And any escape is an occupation. So I'm asking whether this psychological knowledge is not a factor of the shrinkage of the brain. Sorry.
Yes, well, it could be a factor, evidently. If ordinary,
It is.
If knowledge of your profession can be a factor, this knowledge is stronger.
Of course, much stronger.
Yes.
When you say psychological knowledge, you are making distinction between psychological knowledge and, let us say, scientific knowledge or factual knowledge.
Of course, that's what we're saying.
Yes, although...
But I'm a little worried about this article and the fact that scientific knowledge and other types of factual knowledge helps to extend or make the brain bigger. That in itself doesn't lead anywhere.
What do you mean?
Though it postpones senility,
What?
exercising of rational thinking and
As Dr. Worma explained very carefully, if rational thinking becomes merely a routine, I think logically, and therefore I've learned the trick of that, and I keep on repeating it.
that's what happens to most forms of rational thinking.
Of course.
Yes, I think that, say, that they depend on being continually faced with unexpected problems. You see, like as they said, lawyers are very that their brains last longer because see, they're faced with constantly different problems, and therefore they cannot make it entirely a routine. You see, perhaps eventually they could, but it would take a while.
But sir, just a minute. They may have different clients with different problems but they're acting from that from a knowledge which has they're acting from knowledge.
Yes, well, they would say not entirely. They have got to find new facts.
Of course,
and so on.
they're not entirely, but the basis is knowledge, precedents.
Yes.
And book knowledge and various experience with various clients.
Yeah, but then you would have to say that some other more subtle degeneration of the brain takes place, not merely shrinkage.
That's right.
Yes.
That's what I want to get at.
Yes, that's right.
That's what I want to get at.
Yeah.